Well, social media has changed the way a lot of us see ourselves and each other, but it's also changed the way that we learn about and engage with conflicts in the news cycle.
Yeah, and it's certainly something that we're witnessing right now. Here to talk us through this reality is Taylor Owen. He is the founding director of McGill's Center for Media Technology and Democracy, as well as the Beaverbrook Chair in Media, Ethics, and Communications. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's great for you to be here. Yeah. All right, so Taylor, you have been doing research and policy in this space for a very long time. Now, when you open up your social media feeds, what is the starkest difference that you see today?
My God, there's so many. I mean, these things change over time, and you open your feed now, and it's really different than it was even a decade ago. When you think, like, looking at something like the Arab Spring 10 years ago, we opened our feeds, we saw news from the event as it was happening, we saw news on the ground being relayed to us, we saw people being empowered by these technologies. Now you open your feed and you look at the conflict in Gaza, and what do you see? It's something very different. It's divisive content. It's content that either confirms our biases almost perfectly or radicalizes us and makes us angry, and it's something we're totally opposed to. And those two extremes are not a good way of understanding the world or understanding an event like the war that's going on in the Middle East right now.
And you say, Taylor, that social media has forced us into what you call a crisis of knowledge. But this crisis is in part by design, you say. So how are social media platforms actually exacerbating the situation? And let's even go back a step. What does that even mean, a crisis in knowledge?
Totally. So the first thing to know is that these platforms and these tools, these digital tools, whether it's our Instagram feed or our TikTok feeds, are designed. These are built technologies that have incentives behind them. And those incentives are calibrated for us to engage. They want to keep us on their sites and scrolling for as long as possible. They want us commenting, they want us, whatever, just engaging with their product because that's how they make money. That incentive is very different than showing us reliable information about the world, than helping us understand the world in a reliable way as it's actually occurring. And that misalignment of incentives is creating this crisis, I think, where we don't really know the world we're experiencing through the lens of these social platforms.
Very interesting. And you say that AI is playing a major role in escalating conflicts on social media. How so? Break that down for us.
I think it's turbocharging this very problem, right? So AI drives our news feeds. So when we open our TikTok feed, the video that pops up is determined by AI, like what video we'll see and when, and to trigger this emotional response to keep us engaged. But also AI is now used using new generative AI tools to create content as well. So you have an automated system deciding what we see, and you have an automated system actually making the content that we see, and we're sort of we're stuck in the middle of this. Like, how can we defend ourselves as people against these two machines battling for our attention in this really sophisticated way? And it's made us very vulnerable in this system, I think.
I mean, there's a question that's just popped into my head. Are we defenseless because they've hacked our brains?
I mean, they haven't hacked our brains. They've collected huge amounts of data about our behavior online and offline, and they use that to, in a very sophisticated way, target our emotional responses. And so, it's not hacking our brains, but it's certainly taking advantage of our behavior in a way that manipulates us, aligned with their incentives.
Listen, we're talking about all this online behavior, but as we know, what we are seeing and doing online, it doesn't necessarily stay online. It goes offline, out into the real world in day-to-day life. How are we seeing this, quote, crisis of knowledge spill out into real life?
I mean, I think we see it in all sorts of ways, like full spectrum, right? From like, we open our feeds and maybe we don't feel good about ourselves. Maybe we find we have sort of some degree of anger of someone in the real world we might get along with, right? So there's on one end, it's just that. But on the other end, it's actually radicalizing people and leading people to commit violence. And like, look at January 6th in the US. I mean, there's a moment where people were driven into Facebook groups based on false information about the election being stolen, told to descend on the Capitol and storm the Capitol, all because these systems were sharing information with these people that encouraged them to do so. So yes, it's like on one end, just it might make us feel bad, but on the other, it's actually driving us to engage in the world in ways that might not be ideal.
Yeah, that's such a great example. All right, so this content is difficult for us as adults to process, let alone the
for
kids.
Me anyway.
Yeah, let alone the kids who are, you know, looking at their phones day after day after day. And you hosted a summit for teenagers across the country called Citizens Assembly. And you asked these young people how they view social media and what changes they would like to see. And I'm so curious to hear what they had to say.
It was awe-inspiring, I have to say. I mean, imagine being an 18-year-old, having just gone through high school, on social media, and during COVID. So this is like ground zero for this problem, right? 18-year-olds now experienced this in its full effect.
Yeah.
And their primary message to adults was, why did you let these tools be so unsafe that you're letting us use? So take a teenage girl, for example, 13 or 14 years old, who says, why should, to use all the benefits of these social media, which there are many, why should it be allowed that adult men can proposition me in direct messages? Like, why did you let that happen, adults? So they're angry at us for allowing these tools to be just deployed on them and in society without rules. And I think it's a powerful message we have to take seriously.
Whew, Marqueza, sorry you're not getting that phone after all.
Well, I mean...
It's truth. Let's talk about the idea of fact-checking on social media, sort of as related to this crisis of knowledge, or perhaps the idea of regulating every single social media post. We know that's a fantasy.
Totally.
I mean, the horse left the barn a long time ago, right? You do a lot of policy work, you do a lot of research in this area as well, and you've researched specifically initiatives that have been taken around the world in other countries. Give us an example of someone somewhere that's doing it right and how we can take from that example here in Canada.
So the good news of this is over a decade, some governments around the world have begun to experiment in how you might actually regulate these technologies without doing what you said, censoring individual pieces of content. And the key thing they're doing is making companies that deploy and build these products do risk assessments on them to ensure they're safe. So if you're going to deploy a tool that is likely to be used by kids in Europe or the UK, for example, they have to go through a risk assessment to see what are all the ways this could harm that child. And then you have to show that you've mitigated those risks. So it's just like any other product safety standard. It's not sort of rocket science, but we've never done it for these tools because somehow we think they're just social media, they're not harmful. They don't have to go through these same processes. So some governments are stepping up. We're way behind in Canada, and it's sort of, I think, time we do something about it.
Absolutely, because our young people are at risk. All right, so the next time we pick up our phone and we are scrolling through, Taylor, what do you want us to think about?
So look, I think the key thing we can do as consumers and users of these tools is recognize that when we're triggered with an emotion, when we see something, that's on purpose. Someone wanted to trigger that emotion, or that system was built to do that. So it's not us. It's not like, so we have to keep some perspective. When we see something and it angers us and we think we hate that person, we just need to check that and think, okay, there's a bigger system at play here that's making me feel that way. And so when we look at the solutions, it's not all on us. We can't expect kids to turn off their phones all the time. We certainly don't. It's a broader systemic problem that needs a broader democratic response.
Great way to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Taylor, for being here for this very timely conversation.
Hey there, what did you think? Drop your comments below and join the conversation. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can find more on everything from food and fashion to pop culture and current events. See you soon.